Stuart, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Stuart, you're Mr. 5G in the UK, really, aren't you? You know, because you've had a variety of roles. Obviously, the involvement, particularly in the 5G test beds, and the University of Surrey was very active in that test bed program. Can you tell us a bit about the test beds and more generally about emerging UK capability around 5G?
Absolutely. So I think it's been quite an exciting journey with 5G. When you look at the initial kind of trials and testbed program, which was, I think they classed it as phase 0 at DCMS, which was the combination of 3 different universities. So you had the University of Surrey, the University of Bristol, and King's College London, who all came together trying to create 5G UK. And that really demonstrated the academic strengths in the UK around telephony, around mobile communications. And what we've seen is a real blossoming of this DCMS program, which has seen a number of trials and testbed programs come on board. I mean, one of the major ones has been the Worcester Bosch 5G testbed, which was basically around industrial automation, looking at the kind of smart factories. And what we've seen is this development of different use cases that's been developed across the UK. And I think one of the key strengths of this program has really been that we're starting to see not just the technology kind of being brought up to speed, but actually where the real use cases and real life scenarios are coming. And I think that's the key thing for 5G, because there's 5G, like another technologies, is quite high on the hype cycle. People look at things and you hear the words flying taxis, robotic surgery, all these kind of amazing innovative things, but you have to kind of be a bit grounded on this and say, where is the real life use case? How is the person on the street going to actually benefit from 5G? I mean, I think there's a perception that 5G is just about fast download speeds. I think the famous EE advert with Kevin Bacon saying you can download a film in 3 seconds is okay. It's a good use case for 5G on a commercial, on a personal side, but it's not the kind of the real benefit of 5G. When we look at industrial automation, when we look at the rise of smart cities, when we look at autonomous driving, all these kind of areas, that's where the real use case is actually live for 5G. And what this trials and testbed program is really doing is showing that there's expertise and pockets of skill across the UK, and widespread as well. So if we look at kind of the levelling up agenda, we're starting to see a number of the trials and testbeds go up north. So the likes of Manchester, Sunderland, Nottingham. There's been a number of different areas that are benefiting from the trials and testbed program, and I think that's really encouraging, especially from a UK government perspective, if they're looking at inward investment and trying to attract people to the UK. Historically, it's been London and the South where there's been this kind of, densely populated technology companies, and inward investors are looking at that. But now we're starting to see this kind of spread across the country, even up in Scotland, where they've been doing, one of the trials and testbed programs was looking about rural connectivity, and they had, agri-tech and all these different areas that 5G touches. So it's been a real strength for the UK. And it's demonstrated a number of different strengths in different verticals. So we've seen it from the creative industries to manufacturing to digital health, all these kind of areas that we've covered. And I think that's a really interesting thing, because what we don't want to do is just focus on one area. We want to kind of see with things like 5G, how can that touch many, many different industries and different verticals? And that's what the trial and test program has essentially done.
Can you just outline, in terms of the IoT capability, and you mentioned the Bosch Worcester testbed trial, and factory automation and so on. Why is it that the technology, the 5G technology, is more capable in terms of IoT?
So one of the key things about 5G and how the system's been designed is able to handle big data. So historically, if you look at kind of 2G, 3G, 4G journey, the networks were never designed to handle the amount of data that's coming out. So they were essentially, 2G, 3G was more about phones and texts. 4G was pushing it into that kind of video, streaming video, and some bit of gaming. But the network was never designed for people to have, 2 phones on them, an iPad, a watch that's all connected and absolutely bombarding the network. Where 5G has been designed is that it's taken into consideration the technological advancements and the amount of data that's being generated, and what it can do is intelligently bring that off the network, but then be able to plug it into somewhere different. So if we look at IoT, for example, it's able to handle this, and then people are able to put overlays on top so they can get these data back from the network. And, if they're transferring large amounts of data, it's how you actually use that data. And I think that's where the key and the USP for 5G really is, that you're getting all this data coming out, and it's actually what people are able to do on the back of it. Yeah. And that's something that we're seeing in a number of industries. Manufacturing, for example, if they're looking at fault automation, if they're looking at how, if something's going to go wrong in part of the factory, if they're able to detect that early, that's, they can either fix it remotely, getting people using augmented reality to come in and do it, rather than having to wait for an expert to get down to the factory. And even in COVID times, where people haven't been able to travel, if there's a problem and they need an engineer, they need somebody that can fix the problem there and then. Where people haven't been able to travel, that would cause a real problem in their productivity cycle. So it's this ability to handle the large scale of data, but also the latency as well. So the latency is essentially the delay time, or buffering as people call it. The 5G essentially gets rid of that problem. Mm-hmm. So people are able to get real-time data, and it's something that we're starting to see that's going to become critical for the likes of the creative industries, where there can't be that buffering that takes place, because that buffering in certain sectors could be the difference between life and death. Take autonomous driving. If the car's driving and it sees somebody in the road, it needs to tell the car to stop. Mm-hmm. If there was a buffer, and the 3 to 5 seconds on the network to tell them, right, you need to tell the car to stop, that's the difference between that car stopping and that car hitting somebody.
So there's obviously an emerging SME opportunity here, because obviously the hybrid solutions are going to be emerging. But before touching on that, just quickly, your new role is you're heading up the Smart Wireless Innovation Facility in Nottingham, which very much focuses on these IoT use cases. What is that facility, and how is it an exemplar for what's going on in the UK?
Yeah, so the Swift Centre is essentially an investment by the D2N2 LEP in the Nottingham Derby area and Nottingham Trent University. It's going to be a facility where SMEs and large organisations can come and test on a IoT, a LoRaWAN network, and a 5G network as well. Mm-hmm. So what we're looking at doing is giving opportunities for organisations all across the country, so you don't have to be based in the Nottingham or Derby area, to come and trial new products or new services in a safe environment. Because one of the challenges that we've seen is people have got an idea and they want to be able to do something on IoT, or they want to be doing something on 5G, but they've got nowhere to actually physically go and test that product. Mm-hmm. So the USP that we have is we have a number of students that are, able to test some of the solutions as well. You're able to test your product in a real life, real world environment. So, we've seen, you can do things on simulators, but, they don't give kind of real world examples. They'll do the number of people that can trial your solution until it topples over. But, it doesn't take into consideration anything in the real world, people moving about, cars, buses, you name it, that could cause an issue. So we've got the facility that people will be able to test things out on. We're really excited. We're working very closely with the Digital Catapult and a number of select partners in the region. But it's a great opportunity to come in, trial new solutions, see how they work in real life environments, and actually get them to market a lot quicker than you would have if you were not testing it in a real world environment.
Yeah, because that's the key thing, isn't it? For to create these kind of very innovative amalgam or hybrid solutions that take advantage of the 5G capability and IoT capabilities, and also to apply, expertise around data analytics, perhaps that a small systems integrator has built. That means that really they need to be able to test in a kind of quasi real world environment, doesn't it?
Well, that's the key for us. What we're looking at, obviously we've got the university researchers behind us and academics as well that can help with some more of the innovative and more kind of harder questions to answer. But when you've got a product or solution that you want to get into the real world and you need to demonstrate that it can work in a real world environment, that's where we see our testbed and the facility coming into its real strength, because we've got the expertise on site to help people connect to the LoRaWAN and 5G network. We've got the academics behind us who can help work with partners and on research questions that are, that they might not be able to solve for themselves. And, to be doing it in a real world environment, to have, people that are able to test your solution and give real world feedback on it as well. That's something that we really see as a huge strength. And, what we're looking at in Nottingham as a whole is, how we can make the center kind of, a key kind of anchor area for people that want to trial new innovation and new technologies in a safe environment.
Now, what about the infrastructure? Because obviously there's the edge devices. We're going to see the creation of more and more like sensor enabled networks, and you've alluded to that in terms of IoT. So what's the current status really in terms of those edge devices and sensor devices and innovation around all of that? And at the other end, at the sort of server end and the carrier end, what's the current status in terms of the infrastructure rollout?
So, I mean, we're starting to see a lot more sensors, IoT, the term smart cities has been there forever. I've never actually truly seen a smart city. I see some intelligent ones, but I've never really met a real true smart city. And I think, where we are looking at, things going on the edge of the network now, and we see the sensors, we're starting to see a number of things coming out that have what I say is kind of interesting potential. I mean, a lot of cities now are very interested in air quality for their citizens. We see internationally a lot of people doing transportation mapping, and a lot of open data becoming available. And so I think that there is a lot of sensors that are going out there. I think a lot of the local councils now are opening up to the fact that they need to be aware of this data because they can make data-driven decisions. And I think what I like to see is some of these more innovative councils are looking at more making all their decisions around data, and the only way we're going to get access to that data is by getting sensors in different areas so we can actually monitor things. And I think we're starting to see more and more of it. I think we need more of a push, and hopefully this is what the facility is going to be able to do, that we can trial new sensor technology, we can put new things available, but it's making a use case for it and an ROI for it as well. And part of the work that we do, that we want to do, not with just the business schools, but with some of the partners, is how they can build solutions that actually give real world, real use data that they can then commercialize and take out to the public sector or to industry. Because I use the term a lot, but data-driven decisions are the key for me, and I think that's what IoT's real strength is. It's going to be able to give you this up-to-date real-time data, and if you're working over a 5G network, you get this real access to the data on demand, either through dashboards or through whatever. But that will arm people with the information they need to make these critical decisions. And even things when you look at like the emergence of digital twins, all this kind of stuff, that's really the exciting things for me, because when you can start pumping all these models with data and you start seeing the evolutionary impact, and then you can apply artificial intelligence and machine learning to things, you can then start doing some really clever stuff. And that's why I'm really behind things like open data initiatives as well, so people can get as much access to as much data as possible, to help use technology for good. Because I think there's huge amounts of data out there, and I think the key thing is having the people that understand how to read, analyze, and actually use this data. And it's something that we're seeing in a number of industries. Take the sports industry, for example. Football teams now are recruiting sports scientists and data scientists to actually make their decisions around player fitness, player recruitment. The amount of data that they're sucking out that non-traditional industries may never have looked at. Maybe 10, 15 years ago, we would never have said football teams will be primary. They'll have bigger data science departments than they will some of the marketing department, because it just the impact of data at the moment is huge. And data, it's a cliche term, but data is the new oil. The more data you own, the more intelligence you have, the better you will be.
In terms of the hardware infrastructure, Huawei is no longer flavor of the month for obvious reasons, and is essentially being sort of systematically ripped out of the core network. What are the other 5G vendors up to? And maybe you can touch a little bit on sort of open. You mentioned open data, but open source initiatives around creating the software competency to essentially supplant that gap that's been created by the removal of Huawei.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously in the last year we've seen Huawei become a high-risk vendor. That's removed them from the network. So they've got a limited time now that they're able to be part of the network. A number of the mobile network operators in the UK now are having to make alternative solutions. So historically, you've had kind of three major players. You've had Huawei, you've had Ericsson, and you've got Nokia. They've been kind of what I would class as kind of the tier one style partners. You've then got the likes of NEC, Samsung, and the likes below. So you've gone from this model where you've had 3 vendors, you've now kind of gone down to 2 main ones, which is problematic, I think, for the UK in such that you're taking your eggs and putting them kind of in 2 baskets, and if one of those has an issue, you've then got 1 major vendor. So the UK government's been looking at different solutions and what they can do, and kind of the Open RAN initiative, which is the radio access network, kind of seems to be the one that the people are pushing quite heavily. So Open RAN's concept is essentially how do you virtualize and kind of softwareize the radio access network, which will essentially allow a number of smaller vendors to be able to use that and become a large partner in the UK. So that's something that they're looking at quite heavily at the moment. I think there's a number of challenges around that. So security is obviously the big issue with this. People see Open RAN as kind of the be all and end all, but I think we need to make sure that the security platform and the security behind it is watertight, because this is our national infrastructure that's there, and any sort of security problems with that, then we are in serious trouble, especially when you look at 5G and what the data that's being transferred and the chaos that you could cause if you got control of the 5G network. So I don't think there's a quick win at all for it. I think there is a number of exciting initiatives that are coming up. I know DCMS have spoken about some of the work they're looking at with Open RAN and some of the aspirations that they've got there. I think it boils down to things like the trials and testbed program, how they can develop that further and make Open RAN a big part of that, because that will have the same effect that it had on 5G, where that kind of kickstarted a number of discussions with a number of large industry players about how they can get involved in 5G. Doing that with Open RAN will kickstart conversations with people about how they can get the hardware or virtualize the hardware to be able to run in the UK and to be able to demonstrate the ability to open up the hardware to some of the smaller capable players who wouldn't have had a chance in maybe a couple of years or 2, or even now really. If they're not a tier 1 supplier, how do you get to the MNOs? And I think that's the challenge, and I think Open RAN does provide that opportunity. But it's not going to be a quick win where they can say, right, we're going to fix this overnight and we're going to make everything Open RAN across the UK, because you've got current mobile operators who are sweating assets. They've made large scale investments on rollout, and we're still involved in the 5G rollout as well, which is which takes time, has obviously been delayed with the pandemic. So not only are they still rolling out their hardware, but if they're now looking at how do they advance it in the future, it takes time. And I think it's something that's happening, but it won't be an overnight fix, and something that we'll have to wait to see how it goes with the DCMS and some of the future calls they may do.
Absolutely, it's an exciting time. Actually, it's the creation of a whole new market opportunity, and I think great opportunity for SMEs to get actively involved. So, Stuart, thanks very much indeed. It's been a quick fandango over the 5G ecosystem, but thanks for joining us, and very best of luck in your new role at the Smart Wireless Innovation Facility.